Good evening, Shalom, Erev Tov from Jerusalem, Israel. This is Lowell Joseph Gallen, founder of the Root and Branch Association Limited, established in 1981 in New York State. I would like to welcome our viewers and listeners worldwide and our live Zoom studio audience to this evening's program in our Root and Branch Association Limited English Language Conference and Lecture Series, broadcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. And now celebrating our first quarter century, first 25 years from January 1995 until 2020, today. Today is Wednesday, November 11th in the Gregorian calendar, and let me check it, it is the 24th, the 25th day of Cheshvan, 5781, in the Israelite Hebrew calendar. We are also in the 6th year of the 7 Shemitah sabbatical year cycle. And the next year will be the sabbatical Shemitah year. And this Shabbat, the Torah reading is Parshat Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. We are broadcasting from the land of Israel, city of God, Jerusalem, hill of the priests, Givat Hanania Abu Tur, overlooking Mount Moriah, where the third and final Israelite temple of Jerusalem will soon be under reconstruction and stand forever, as per the prophet Ezekiel's vision. Please see Ezekiel chapters 40 through 48. The Root and Branch Association Limited promotes the study and practice of universal Israelite Jewish teachings within the framework of the universal Noahide covenant and laws. Please see the book of Genesis chapter 9. And affirmation of God's land, Torah, and people covenants with his chosen people, Israel. Our speaker for this evening's program is Dr. Navras Jat Afridi, Assistant Professor of History at Presidency University in Calcutta, India, and a Research Fellow at the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy in New York. Our speaker will speak this evening on the tradition of the Israelite origin of the Pashtuns, also known as the Pathans, the Pashtunim, the Pathans, the Pashtun primarily living in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And now I would like to welcome our speaker. Usually we have an introduction by our program chair, Dr. Les Glassman, who's a dentist. But he isn't home from the office yet. He's fixing somebody's teeth. And as soon as he gets here, he will join us. And then after Dr. Afridi's talk, Dr. Glassman and I will move to questions for and comments to Dr. Afridi. Dr. Afridi, now I hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm so glad that I have been provided this opportunity to speak to you, and I'm most grateful to my friend, Mr. Lowell Gallen, for this opportunity. I have a long association with Root and Branch Association, this organization. And when it comes to the occasions when I have spoken overseas, then Root and Branch Association was one of the earliest organizations to invite me to give a public lecture. So I am grateful to this organization for that. And the first time I spoke under the auspices of the Root and Branch Association in Jerusalem was way back in the year 2006, when I was doing my first postdoctoral stint at the Graduate School of Historical Studies, Tel Aviv University. Today I shall be speaking to you about the tradition of the Israelite origin of Pashtuns. Let me also tell you right in the very beginning that from my paternal side, I am a Pashtun myself. My father was born in a Pashtun family, though He did not come from the native place of Pashtuns, that is Afghanistan, or northeastern Afghanistan or northwestern Pakistan, but he was born in the diaspora. He came from the Pashtun diasporic population in India. The fact that I have been invited to speak on a subject related to the lost tribes of Israel, and the fact that I studied the subject living in India, far away from Israel, at a time when I had never visited Israel, these are testaments to the enduring interest in the subject of the lost tribes of Israel. And the fact that the lost tribes of Israel have been a subject of interest for thousands of years, and the traditions of Israelite origin have persisted among the Pashtuns for so long a span of time, is itself seen as evidence of their being Israelite by origin by many. And one of those who saw it as an evidence of the authenticity of their Israelite origin was the second president of Israel, Yitzhak Pensifi, who was also a lost tribes enthusiast. But this is not a view that is shared by scholars generally. The standard view among scholars is that the lost tribes of Israel, even if these tribes ever existed, they assimilated in the general populations of the countries, of the regions where they were settled. And now it is just not possible to distinguish the descendants of the lost tribes of Israel from the rest of the populations where these tribes were settled. This is the standard view among scholars across the world. But this has not discouraged groups across the world from claiming Israelite descent, nor has it discouraged groups among Jews and also among Christians to go in search of the remnants of the lost tribes of Israel. So the search for the remnants of the lost tribes of Israel continues still in the 21st century. When we talk of Pashtuns, we have to understand that Pashtuns are also known by the terms Pathans and Pashtuns and even Afghans. And these are terms that are used interchangeably. There is nothing wrong with using these terms interchangeably, though each has its own meaning, and it would be better that we know what each means. Pashtuns is the term that is used by the Southern Highlanders. Pashtuns is the term used by the Northern Highlanders. And in the plains of the Indian subcontinent, that is in South Asia at large, they are known as Pathans. They form the world's largest conglomeration of tribes in northeastern Afghanistan and also in southeastern Afghanistan and in northwestern Pakistan. Their population is estimated to be somewhere around 40 and 41 million. This is an estimate of their population from the year 2012. They are the largest ethnic group in Afghanistan, and their proportion in Afghanistan's total population is around 15.42%. I'm sorry, in Afghanistan's population, their proportion is around 42%, whereas in Pakistan's total population, their proportion is around 15.42%. The population in Pakistan is estimated to be 27.60 million, whereas in Afghanistan, their population is estimated to be 14.02 million. These are estimates from the year 2012. But there is also a sprinkling of Pashtuns in India. They have a diaspora in India where they settled during the rule of the Muslim dynasties in India from the 13th century to the 20th century. And my own paternal ancestors settled at a place called Malihabad in district Lucknow in Uttar Pradesh between the years 1748 and 1761. So here in this table, you can see the location, the population, and the tradition that they hold on to. Here we have a few images of Pashtuns in their traditional attire. They are a warlike people and have been celebrated in history as warriors. They also served as mercenaries and have excelled in the defense forces. They have also produced some luminaries in both India and Pakistan, and of course also in Afghanistan. The third president of India, Dr. Zakir Hussain, was a Pashtun, and he came from the Afridi tribe. Here we have another famous Pashtun, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, who was also known by the title Frontier Gandhi. He was also a freedom fighter. He struggled against the British imperialist rule in India. Now, this map gives us an idea of the geographical spread of Pashtuns. You see the area shaded in orange is the territory populated by Pashtuns, and it is divided by a boundary line, which we know as the Durand line, because the officer who drew this line was Sir Mortimer Durand. It is after him that this border is named. This border line forms the international boundary between these two states, Afghanistan and Pakistan, and the territory east of this boundary line was conquered by the British during the Second Anglo-Afghan War. And when Pakistan was carved out of India in 1947, this territory became part of Pakistan by default. Though it is an international boundary that Afghanistan hasn't completely accepted, and it still makes claims over this territory and consider this territory to be its own. There has also been a Pashtun separatist movement in this territory, and there have been voices in favor of merging with Afghanistan, merging the Pashtun territory with the state of Afghanistan. These are a few other maps. The Pashtun territory largely lives in the administrative zone known by the acronym FATA in Pakistan. FATA is acronym for the federally administered tribal areas there. And there are altogether 7 units in these tribal areas, and the nomenclature used for each unit is agency. And one of those agencies is the Khyber Agency, which is also home to the 2 passes, the 2 strategically most important passes, the Khyber Pass and the Kohat Pass. And this territory is in this Khyber Agency, this unit in the federally administered tribal areas, is largely inhabited by 2 Pashtun tribes, the Afridi tribe and the Khatak tribe. The Pashtuns are divided into 60 tribes, and these 60 tribes are further subdivided into 400 clans. They are not homogeneous in terms of their origins. there are a number of tribes among the Pashtuns that are of Turkish origin. That is, tribes whose roots go back to uh, whose roots lie in the region of Turkestan or the CIS states, the states that seceded from the Soviet Union and formed their own loose federation called the Confederation of Independent States. That is the region north of the river Oxus, or the region north of Amu Darya. But there are also tribes that aren't of Turkish origin. And it is primarily those tribes, in fact, not primarily, but exclusively, it's exclusively those tribes among the Pashtuns that do not have Turkish origins, that have this tradition of Israelite descent. And Afridi is one of those tribes that have the tradition of descent from the lost tribes of Israel. This is the total area of this territory, Fata, that is a federally administered tribal area, as the homeland of the Pashtuns in Pakistan, 27,220 square kilometers. There are, if you look at the total number of the claimants of Israelite descent across the world, you would find that their number is exactly equal to the number of Jews across the world today. The total population of Jews is estimated to be around 15 million. And that is also the number of those who claim to be of Israelite descent, though they aren't yet considered Jewish. But among all these claimants of Israelite descent across the world, the Pashtuns stand out because of a number of reasons. And one of those reasons is that, unlike any other claimant of Israelite descent, one comes across very ancient references to the Israelite descent, to the putative Israelite origins of Pashtuns. And those ancient references are found in the writings of Josephus, whose period is 37 to 100 CE, then in 2 Esdras, and from the 1st century, in the writings of Sadia Gaon, the writings of Moses ibn Ezra, the writings of Daniel al-Qumsi, Japheth ben Ali. The writings of all these scholars, one comes across references to the tradition of the Israelite origin of Pashtuns. There are also a number of Persian references to the Israelite origin of Pathans or Pashtuns. Here on the screen, we have a list of those Persian texts. So Jews, Christians, and Muslims, all three have written about the putative Israelite origins of Pashtuns. And this is something that you do not see with any other group claiming to be of Israelite stock anywhere else in the world. So this is something that is peculiar to Pashtuns. And it is because of this that even modern anthropologists have considered the Pashtuns to be the best contenders for the status of the lost tribes of Israel. Now here on my screen, I have a list of those European adventurers and Christian missionaries who saw the Pathans as lost Israelites. But there are historians who caution us against taking this for a historical fact, because it has also been observed that Christian missionaries have particularly shown great enthusiasm in conferring the status of the lost tribes of Israel on any group that they have come across whose customs and rituals have even remotely resembled the customs and rituals and practices of the lost of ancient Israelites as described in the Hebrew Bible. And this enthusiasm that Christians have displayed in conferring the status of lost Israelites on such groups emanates out of their desire to convert all the lost sheep, all the groups that have been referred to in the Bible, in the New Testament as the lost sheep. And this desire emanates out of the Christian desire to convert them all so that Christ's return to earth can be expedited. It is closely related to their belief that until all Israelites, descendants of all the tribes of Israel, not just the two tribes whose descendants are identified as Jews today, but also the descendants of the lost tribes, until all of them convert to Christianity, Jesus will not return to earth. So it is, since it is so closely related to this belief of theirs, there has been great enthusiasm among Christian missionaries to see lost Israelites in different parts of the world, even if there is little evidence to support this. Sir William Jones, who was an 18th century historian, found traces of the lost tribes in Afghanistan. I already mentioned Ishaq Ben Safi, historian and second president of Israel, who devoted a whole chapter to the Pashtuns in his book, The Exiled and the Redeemed, and was of the firm belief that the Pashtuns had descended from the lost tribes of Israel. He writes about them that their physiognomy shows typical Jewish facial traits. They are great champions of liberty and were known under British rule for their love of freedom and independence. The fact that this tradition and no other has persisted among these tribes is itself a weighty consideration. Then Pathans are also the only people in the world whose probable descent from the lost tribes of Israel finds mention in a number of texts right from the 10th century to the present day, written by Jewish, Christian, and Muslim scholars alike. This is something that should certainly be given attention, because we do not see this with any other group claiming Israelite descent. Then their claim of Israelite descent cannot be seen as a byproduct of Christianity, as considered to be the case with the Beni Menashe of northeastern India and the Beni Ephraim of southern India, by anthropologists like Meyer Samra, Shalva Weil, and Tudor Parfit, for they have never been in the influence of missionaries, unlike the other claimants of Israelite descent. The Pathans cannot be suspected of fabricating a fake Israelite genealogy to make it to the first world by migrating to Israel, as they have no desire to do so. They're just as hostile and antagonistic towards the state of Israel as many Muslims anywhere else in the world are. It is just that they derive great pride out of tracing their descent from one of the biblical characters, Jacob, whose alternative name is Israel, revered as a prophet also by Muslims, irrespective of race and descent. The theory propounded by Olive Caro that the Pashtun tradition of descent from the lost tribes of Israel emanates from their desire to distance themselves from their pre-Islamic polytheistic past, as it helps them to trace their genealogy from the supposed patriarchs and founders of monotheism, accepted by Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike, is too far-fetched to be considered. The question arises that if it is so, why did not the other Muslim communities of South Asia do the same? Although traditions of Israelite descent have existed among the Pathans for centuries, yet those who are resident far away from their native places in the Pashtun diaspora of India are largely ignorant of them. Perhaps when the Pathans settled in India, they did not mention the traditions of their Israelite origin, as they probably feared losing favor with the non-Pathan Muslim rulers of India at the time. As a result, the word was not passed on to the coming generations, and subsequently, They were left ignorant of the traditions of their Israelite descent. So my father came from the Afridi tribe, one of the 60 tribes the Pashtuns are divided into, but it is not merely one of the 60 Pashtun tribes, it is one of the most important of those 60 tribes because of its numerical strength and also because of its affluence and also as much because of the political clout that it enjoys in that region. The affluence comes from the fact that the, the two strategically most important passes happen to be located in that territory, which have been sources of revenue for them. They could always extract toll from whosoever passed through those passes, and nobody could enter the Indian subcontinent without going through those passes. The location of the Pashtuns of the Afghani tribe in India has primarily been in the state of Uttar Pradesh. This is where the city of Agra is located, where the Taj Mahal is. This is also the state where the city of Varanasi is, which is frequently visited by Israeli tourists and is a holy Hindu city. And there are two Afridi Pathan settlements in Uttar Pradesh. One is Qaimganj in district Farrukhabad, and the other is Malihabad in district Lucknow. Lucknow is the administrative capital of Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh is the most populous Indian state, and its population is almost equal to the population of Pakistan or in fact, or even Brazil. So the number 32 on the map denotes the district of Lucknow, where Malihabad is located, which is my native place. And here on the screen, I have pictures of two Afridi Pathan nobles from Malihabad. And this is on the screen, I have pictures of, in one picture, we have Professor Tudor Parfit, an anthropologist from London University, and along with him is Yulia Gurov, who is a professor at Durham University. They visited Malihabad at my invitation in the year 2002 to collect DNA samples of my fellow Afridi Pashtuns in Malihabad. They collected mouth swabs of 50 paternally unrelated Afridi men from the place, and those mouth swabs, those DNA samples were analyzed by geneticists Dr. Neil Bradman and Dr. Mark Thomas at University College London, but the results were neutral. I can only speculate as to why the results were neutral, and what is meant by results being neutral is that they did not prove either way. They neither proved that the Pashtuns were not of Israelite origin, nor did they prove that the Pashtuns in Malihabad were of Israelite stock. And I think it has to do with the dilution of their tribal purity. They have been so few in numbers. Malihabad's total population is only 16,850. Out of these 16,850 people, only 1,200 of them are Pashtuns. And of these 1,200 people, only 600 belong to the Afridi tribe. So given the small numbers, it was just not possible for the Afridi Pashtuns to marry only amongst themselves. There were a lot of inter-tribal marriages, and as I said right at the very beginning, not all Pashtun tribes have the tradition of Israelite origin. There are a number of tribes among the Pashtuns that are of Turkish origin, which do not have tradition of Israelite descent. A second attempt to genetically analyze the Pashtuns, to do a DNA analysis of the Pashtuns in Malihabad was made by Shahnaz Ali, an Indian geneticist, who was awarded a scholarship by the government of Israel to conduct her research at the Israeli Institute of Technology under the supervision of Professor Karl Skorsky, who is famous across the world for his groundbreaking research on Kohanim. Through that research, he established the similarity of the Kohen DNA across the world among the Kohen populations. But it is said that Shahnaz Ali abandoned that project midway, although she had been awarded the fellowship to analyze the samples that she had collected. Instead of mouth swabs, she collected blood samples of the Afridi Pashtuns from Malihabad. But then she did not analyze those samples to confirm whether they could be said to be of Israelite stock, but instead used those samples for medical research because she felt that the study could be extremely controversial in nature. Hence, she abandoned the project midway. I wrote my doctoral thesis not only on the Jewish communities in India, but also on Judaic movements and the traditions of Israelite descent in India. And my doctoral research triggered interest in my hometown, Malihabad. And as a result of that interest, there were a number of Israeli scholars who visited Malihabad. And here in this slide, you can see some Jewish visitors from Israel and the US visiting Malihabad. In one picture, we have Dr. Eyal Be'eri, who is a researcher, and he won his doctorate for his research on the Israelite origins of Pashtuns, on the tradition of the Israelite origin of Pashtuns from Ariel University. And here he can be seen shaking hands with Qavi Kamal Khan, who was then the eldest Afridi Pashtun in Malihabad. He happened to be my uncle. And in the other picture is Dr. Kenneth X. Robbins, author of several books, with his wife and with his friends. And right in the center is an Afridi Pashtun in Malihabad. Then Malihabad was also visited by Israeli tour operators to explore the possibility of adding Malihabad to the Jewish tourist circuit for tourists interested in the lost tribes of Israel, in the search for the lost tribes of Israel. This is how the visit of a couple of Israeli scholars was covered by the local press, by the local English language press. And here we have the picture of Rabbi Eliyahu Birnbaum, who is a judge on the court of the chief rabbinate of Israel. Here we can see his picture during a visit of his to the Pathan diaspora in Rajasthan, where they discovered old genealogical accounts, centuries old genealogical accounts of the Pashtuns there. And in those genealogical accounts, there is mention of the descent from the lost tribes of Israel. In this picture, it is Rabbi Eliyahu Avichail, who traveled more extensively than Benjamin of Tudela ever did in search of the lost tribes of Israel. And I was hosted by him on a number of occasions during my stay in Israel. And this is what he said, that we, as well as the Pathans themselves, have a very clear tradition that they, especially those of them who have the names of our tribes, belong to the 10 tribes of Israel. According to the book of Psalms, after Menashe, God will bring Ephraim to the land of Israel. So my dream is now to help the Afridi to come back to their roots, to come back after Menashe to Israel. Ephraim is more important. When Ephraim will be here, it will change a lot of things. This is the picture of the first ever Pashtun delegation that visited Israel in November 2015 at the invitation of Amishav. And Dr. Eyal Be'eri was instrumental in organizing their trip to Israel. They stayed in Israel for 10 days and were shown, they were given a tour of Judea and Samaria, the places that are believed to have been the areas where the tribes of Israel lived, the lost tribes, that is. Now, this is a picture of one of the expeditions conducted by Amishaf in the 1980s. This is a picture from Kashmir. We can see Rabbi Eliyahu Evachail in the picture. Rabbi Eliyahu Evachail also sent expeditions to Afghanistan in the 70s to explore the traditions of Israelite origin among the Pashtuns there. And Rabbi Eliyahu Evachail was absolutely convinced of the Israelite origins of Pashtuns. Lately, interest in the Israelite origin of Pashtuns has been shown by a number of organizations, and there are Jewish organizations that have been organizing events aimed at bringing the Pashtuns and the Jews in the diaspora together. So this is an event that took place in California in 2018, yet another such event that took place in New York. Then in 2019, an event was organized, a conference was organized in the city of Jaipur, aimed at exploring the putative Israelite origins of Pashtuns, and the members of 12 different Pashtun tribes were present at that conference. This is a picture from that conference from Jaipur. Get another picture from that conference. One more. But the Pashtuns in India or even anywhere else have not shown any signs of developing any Judaizing movement among them. It is unlikely that they would develop any. It is yet to be seen as to whether this consciousness of this tradition of theirs of descent from the lost tribes of Israel would bring about any change in their attitudes towards the state of Israel and also in the attitude towards Jews at large across the world. Thank you very much. I would be very happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, Navris?
Yes, Noel.
Yes, I think we're on the gallery view now. I think we are. And let me just ask Dr. Glassman, because he's still, he's watching, but he's still well, actually he's on his way home. I can see that. Thank you for the illuminating, inspiring talk. Your talks are always illuminating, inspiring. Hello, Les.
Hi, Lal, how are you? And wow, thank you so much for this most incredible, unbelievable presentation on the Pashtuns. It's something, it's really remarkable. This was I must tell you, it was very, very enlightening. And I wish more people would know the history of the Pashtuns and the connection to Judaism. And I think you gave the most remarkable, incredible presentation.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you.
No, I'm extremely grateful to you because, and Lola as well for organizing this, because I think it's just so important. The lost 10 tribes of Israel, it's central to Judaism. It plays such an important part in Jewish history and our traditions. And wow, I'm really bowled over. It was a phenomenal presentation that you gave.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. And I'm most grateful to the Root and Branch Association, to you, Dr. Glassman, and to my friend, Mr. Gallen, for giving me this opportunity to speak today.
Your passion, I must just mention, your passion comes through. Not only are you very articulate, which you really are, but your research and your your desire to just to tell it as it is, and it's just phenomenal. And I just hope through the recording that a lot of people will be able to watch this and to benefit. And you've really opened up a door which has been closed for so many centuries. I think this is really this is groundbreaking, in my opinion. It really is.
Thank you very much. I think what has been extremely detrimental to the academic search for the lost tribes of Israel is the view that has come to be the standard view among scholars, that the lost tribes of Israel should be relegated to the realm of myth, and the lost tribes of Israel are simply seen as a legend, something that shouldn't be taken seriously. There is great discouragement to look at the subject with seriousness.
Yeah.
And I think this has been very detrimental to the study of the lost tribes of Israel. I'm not saying that everything that is there in the scriptures and in the Hebrew Bible should be read literally. We should be able to read the metaphors, and we should also be conscious that a number of things that figure in the Hebrew Bible have come from the epics, from the Babylonian epics, from the Assyrian epics, from the Sumerian epics. So we should do that with this consciousness. Yet we shouldn't be dismissive, completely dismissive of the subject of the lost tribes of Israel. And perhaps if we devote more attention to it, we may come out with some groundbreaking discoveries. Who knows? With our modern tools of investigation.
Yeah, with DNA, with
means of research, yes.
Sure.
But I must another problem is that it hasn't been possible to do DNA sampling in the native places of Pashtuns, that is in Afghanistan and Pakistan, because of the political turmoil in those places.
Yeah,
it would certainly not be safe.
It wouldn't be safe.
To travel to those countries to collect DNA samples of the Pashtuns there. But it may be possible with the Pashtun diaspora in America. But again, if DNA samples are collected, this distinction would also need to be made that the samples are collected exclusively from those Pashtun tribes that have traditions of Israelite origin and not from the Pashtun tribes who are of Turkish origin.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. But you know, just on my side, growing up in a traditional Jewish background, the Lost 10 Tribes was very central to Jewish history that I learned. We were always told from our rabbis and from our teachers, it's over the Sambatyon River that the 10 tribes are, and but we always had the belief that one day it would be reunited. So it played a very, very central part in Judaism. You know, those Lost 10 tribes, although they were lost, but it was always felt that one day they would be reunited, and we see it slowly happening in our days. There are, when you came to Israel, you can see an ingathering of all the exiles from all four corners of the earth. But the Lost 10 tribes is still, they say, like with Ethiopia, that's also possibly from, you know, the remnants over there, or the Lemba tribes. There's many places where there are Lost 10 tribes, but Pashtuns, it's a big deal. I mean, this is what you've documented and what you've spoken about. It strikes a very strong chord here. It really does.
And numerically speaking, they are the strongest of all claimants of Israelite origins. Their population is estimated to be around 41 million. And unlike any other claimants of Israelite descent, as I mentioned in my talk, there are references to those traditions that go back in texts that go back to the 10th century CE.
Well, you know, that figure, if you think, we were also, as a young kid, I was told by we had some very prominent rabbis that taught us, and they said the time of Yetziat Mitzrayim, when we left Egypt, there were the same amount of Jews as there were Chinese. And if you look at how many Chinese there are in the world today, and you look how many Jews there are in the world today, but if you think through the centuries, and the last 10 tribes it was a large majority of the Jewish population that were exiled. So when you speak about in the 40 million, it makes a lot of sense. It really does.
Navris, I've heard you tell a story that I would like to ask you to share with our viewers and listeners, if you care to, which was how old you were and where you were when you first heard someone in your family bring up this idea that your family might be lost Israelites.
I must have been around 12 years old when an uncle of mine mentioned that we are of Israelite origin. This is a tradition in our family that we have descended from the 12 tribes of Israel. Though when I talked about it with the other elders, they admitted to it, that they were aware of this tradition, but nobody seemed to ever talk about it. But as far as the younger generation is concerned, the younger generation was largely ignorant of this tradition.
Now, I've noticed over the last decade or two, an increasing number of books, articles, films, and contacts between Jews and Pathans around the world. And that does seem to be increasing. I'd like to ask you, is it fair to say that the father or mother of lost tribes studies in general, going back 40 years, would be Dr. Shalva Weil? Was she the first person? I mean, I know there was President Yitzhak Ben Zvi, and there were people who researched it, but in terms of the person who got the ball rolling in the academic world and was treated as a flat earth society in the beginning when she brought it up, would that be Shalva?
I think that would be a fair assessment. Yes, I would agree with that.
What now, in addition to relations between people and groups, what has been the response of the governments of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the state of Israel to all of this, if they've responded or noticed at all?
I don't know if they have taken any notice of this, but I think it could be of interest to all those who are interested in the putative Israelite origins of Pashtuns, that the current Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, is a Pashtun.
He's a Pashtun?
Yes.
Well, and you know, he married, before he got divorced.
Smith.
Yeah, so she has Jewish roots.
Yes, yes.
So he's a Pashtun. Wow, that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
What about the in terms of the Pashtun and the traditional faith that they have would mostly be Sunni Muslim with a heavy dose of Sufi mysticism? Is that fair?
Yes, traditionally the Pashtuns have been Sufis, but since the jihad against the Soviets in Afghanistan, Wahhabism and Salafism has spread rapidly among the Pashtuns, and we all know that how the Taliban movement came into existence in the seminaries, in the refugee camps, in the Afghan refugee camps in Pakistan. And it is said that the CIA also kind of assisted in the rise of that movement, because they felt that this movement could be used against the Russians in Afghanistan.
And look how it backfired. Yeah.
Yes, it backfired. To be counterproductive.
Yeah. I've read that people in the Taliban movement who, from my research, follow a version of the Wahhabi religion known as Deobandism, for the city of Deoband in India, from which those missionaries came to them, have been approached about this issue, and they say, yes, we know we're Israelites, and let's kill all the Zionists.
Well, the fact is that Deoband is a highly respected institution of Islamic learning in India. And there have been clerics in Deoband who have shown disapproval to the ways of the Taliban, in spite of the
Oh,
fact that there have been occasions when Taliban have mentioned Deoband as the source of their ideological inspiration. It is in spite of that there have been voices from Deoband that have shown disapproval to the kind of Islam they wish to they believe in, and the kind of Islamic state they envision, and the kind of Islamic state they also established when they came to hold power in Afghanistan.
It would seem to me that since the traditions of Israelite origin among the Pashtuni are far older than Islam itself, which is only 1,300 years old. I don't know when Islam arrived in Afghanistan. That
There is some noise in the background. It is because of this that the audibility.
wait a second. I'm asking Les.
oh, okay. I think.
What I did was I just muted uh, Les's microphone for a moment because of the background noise. Let me try to unmute it. Ask to unmute it.
Unmute. Okay, there was background noise. I'm sorry.
No,
Well,
That
that's okay.
people are getting a bit lively because, in a way, the lockdown's coming hopefully to a bit of an end. So
Right.
people are trying to celebrate a little bit.
to go back
Could
to
I just ask? Could I just ask Lal one quick? When you came to Israel,
Yes.
on a personal level, did you feel like a strong attachment to the land and to the people?
Well, mm,
I
I'll
know it's a
tell
very
you.
personal question. It's a
Yes, yes.
very
I'll tell you frankly. My father, as I mentioned, comes from a Pashtun family, and my mother was born in a Hindu family. And when my parents got married in a civil manner, it was without the involvement of any religious conversion. So my mother can be best described as a non-conformist Hindu, while my father uh, lost faith in Islam when he was all of 10. And he decided to spend the rest of his life without any religion. So I was raised without any religion in a very secular environment. I never received any lessons in religion. I developed an interest in the lost tribes of Israel because of my desire to trace my genealogy centuries back. And it was this desire of mine that led me to research the subject for my doctorate and also for my postdoctorate. As I studied, I also learned about Jewish history, the vicissitudes that the Jews went through in their history, and I developed great admiration for Jews, for their resilience and also for their scholarship. So it really was a dream. It was really the fulfillment of a dream for me when I managed to go to Israel. So I was very happy to be in Israel, and I still consider the 1 year spent in Israel as the best phase of my life. It was
that's
immensely rewarding.
amazing.
It was immensely rewarding for me. I uh, came to have friendships so, which have lasted for so long. I still have so many friends in Israel. I meet such friends there and had a lovely time in Israel, and also had the opportunity to enjoy the company of very learned scholars there, both secular scholars as well as religious scholars. Although I was raised in a very secular environment, yet I was never disrespectful to religion or to religious scholars.
it would seem to me that in terms of traditions and consciousness and group consciousness, the traditions of Israelite origin among the Pashtun are far older than Islam itself. And
That is true. That is true.
Yeah.
in the long run, far more powerful than winds that may blow in and may blow out. So, for example, you have the tribal religion of the Al Saud, which is the Wahhabi religion. Wahhabis, as they are called by Sunnis and Shiites, call themselves Salafis. And this is, in my opinion, a passing wind a storm wind that will come through, has been there and will dissipate because it's so self-destructive with its cult of suicide, murder, that it doesn't have any long-term, it self-destructs. And it's also not indigenous to Patan religious and cultural traditions. So in the long run, it will pass away. Now, I know I have met some Jews from Afghanistan. Most of the Jews of Afghanistan ended up emigrating to Israel and other places. And I spoke to some of them, and I don't remember whether I spoke with them. Wait, why is asked on mute? Whether this is what they told me or I heard it secondhand. But what I heard was that when the Jews who lived in the large cities in Afghanistan, who were in many cases merchants and traders, would go up into the mountains, they were welcome. Whereas in general, if you were not a member of a clan or a tribe, it was not a good idea to go wander in someone else's tribal territory. You would not be welcome unless for some very special reason you were invited. And what I heard was when Jews came in the mountains, it was completely opposite, which is you're our relatives, and we're also interested in what you're carrying on your donkeys or camels. And you are welcome here, and you are safe here. This is what I heard either from Jews from Afghanistan in Israel, or I heard it secondhand. But I did hear it.
I was born in the city of Lucknow, and my ancestral hometown, Malihabad, is at a distance of 27 kilometers from the city of Lucknow. So I did not grow up in Malihabad. And as far as the teeny tiny Pashtun population in Malihabad is concerned, since it settled there, since their ancestors settled in Malihabad in the mid-18th century, they have completely acculturated to the local ways. They have lost their tribal characteristics.
Wow.
There is absolutely nothing that would distinguish them from the local population other than their physical appearance. They still have lighter skin color. They are taller than the average, what the average height of the locals is there in that region. So they stand out with their physical appearance, light skin color and strong physique, and they're being taller than the rest. This is all that distinguishes them from the local population.
But did they assimilate? Have they assimilated?
They culturally speaking, they are, as far as the marriages are concerned.
Yeah.
Although it wasn't possible for these Pashtuns to marry only within the tribe because of their small numbers, but they ensured that they married only among the Pashtuns. Even if those were inter-tribal marriages, yet they married only among the Pashtuns, and they largely did not marry with non-Pashtuns. My father would be considered an exception, who married a Jat from the Hindu community. Jat is another warlike people. It spread all across northwestern India. 1/3 of Jat population is Hindu, 1/5 is Sikh, the rest are all Hindus. But I shouldn't be speaking more about Jats here, because the topic of our discussion today is the Pashtun people, not the Jats.
That's also very fascinating. It's also very, very interesting. India seems to be, it's just an amazing country, and it seems to, there's so much with the caste system, but there's so many different varieties. And can I just mention something that in my studies, they say that India is one of the only countries in the world where the Jews never experienced anti-Semitism.
That is true. That is absolutely true. this is interesting. There are two things. It is absolutely correct when it is said that India is, I won't say it is absolutely true, because China is also another country where Jews did not face anti-Semitism, did not experience anti-Semitism. But what distinguishes the Jewish story in India from their story in China is the fact that we still have Jewish communities in India, not just one Jewish community, but several Jewish communities in India, whereas in China, there isn't
They
any.
assimilated. Yeah, they totally assimilated. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So China lost her Jews not because it persecuted her Jews. There was no persecution, but they assimilated. In India, the caste system proved to be a blessing in disguise for the Jews, because of the caste system, the Indian society has been absolutely endogamous. They marry only within their caste group. So there was never any desire to intermarry with Jews. And another factor that proved to be of benefit to the Jews in both these countries, India as well as China, is the fact that the widely practiced religion in both these countries, China and India, was non-proselytizing in nature.
Yeah.
So neither the followers of Confucianism nor the followers of Hinduism had any desire to convert the Jews in their midst to their religion.
Wow.
So this enabled the Jews to live in absolute peace with their non-Jewish neighbors in both India and China. But this should not delude us into believing that anti-Semitism has been unknown in India. The fact is that there has always been anti-Semitism in India, but it has been confined, it has been limited to certain sections of India's Muslim and Christian populations, and even among those populations, it has largely been confined merely to rhetoric. And wherever Muslims have been in direct contact with Jews in India, they have produced beautiful examples of cordiality and amity. Today, as we speak, almost all synagogues in India are looked after by Muslims. All Jewish cemeteries in India are looked after by Muslims. Most of the students in the Jewish-run schools in India are Muslims. Jews in Bombay generally live in predominantly Muslim neighborhoods, and the relations between numerically the largest of the Jewish communities in India, the Beni Israel, and the Muslims were so close that the Beni Israel adopted a number of kinship terms and religious terms from Muslims. They use the word namaz for their prayers. They used to refer to their synagogues as masjid. There is a local station, a local railway station in Mumbai called Masjid. Masjid is a variant of the Urdu word for mosque, masjid.
Wow.
And people are deluded into thinking that this station is perhaps named after a mosque, but it is actually named after a synagogue that is located very close to that railway station.
Gee. So on a personal note, my wife's her first cousin, their grandmother came from Delhi.
I see.
And she was very Indian, in her dress, and she came to Israel in '48, but all her ways, her eating was very Indian, and we just embraced it. And most of her friends, even though she was Indian, she remained strongly with the Indian community here in Israel. Amazing.
Well, there have been 3 Jewish communities in India, and other than these 3 communities, there are 3 Judaism movements that emerged in India. 2 of these movements emerged during the second half of the 20th century, and the 3rd Judaism movement emerged in India during these 2 decades of the 21st century. So when we speak of the 3 Jewish communities, that is not the Judaism movements. Those 3 Jewish communities are the Beni Israel, the Kochni, and the Baghdadi. The Beni Israel and the Kochni are the older resident Jewish communities in India. the community that we know today as Baghdadi, or the community that came to be known as Baghdadi, members of this community came not just from the city of Baghdad, but from a number of Middle Eastern countries. But in the colloquial language, they all came to be called Baghdadis because of the commercial importance of Baghdad at that time. And they settled in India between the decades of 1790s and 1830s. When they arrived in India, they were completely Arabian in their ways, in their culture, in their language. The only thing that distinguished them from the Arabs was their faith in Judaism. But once they settled in India, it did not take them very long to realize that it was wiser to identify with the ruler than with the subjects. It was wiser to identify with the colonizer rather than the colonized. Hence, they completely anglicized themselves during their stay in India. And by doing so, they did so also to escape the worst aspect of British imperialism in India, that is racism. They felt that they could benefit from their lighter skin color, and hence they deliberately tried to distance themselves from the already resident Jewish communities in India, the Beni Israel and the Kochni, who were just who could not be physically distinguished from the rest of the Indian population. And they did not want to be seen as part and parcel of the Beni Israel and the Kochni. Hence, they tried to distance themselves from these already existent Jewish communities in India and aspired to be recognized as Europeans. And this aspiration for whiteness was not peculiar to the Baghdadi Jews. It was in fact shared by some other small communities as well that were of foreign origin at that time in British India. That is the Zoroastrians and the Armenians.
And are there still any Baghdadi Jews, any community left?
Yes. There are about 20 or 22 individuals of this community still here in the city of Kolkata, where I live. And they have 3 synagogues, and these 3 are functional. And this 22 member community has also come to have a rabbi, a resident rabbi now, who is sponsored, who is supported by a kosher certifying company.
That's amazing.
So regular services are held in the synagogues in Kolkata, and these synagogues are majestic and breathtakingly beautiful.
Wow, that's incredible.
It was only a couple of years ago that the synagogues in Kolkata were restored. So they are again back to their pristine glory.
Navras, there are, you mentioned 45 to 50 million Pashtun around the world.
I'm not in a position to give you an estimate of the global population, but the data that I have, the figures that I have come from the year 2012. And in 2012, the Pashtun population in these 2 countries, Pakistan and Afghanistan, was estimated to be around 41 million, with 27.60 million in Pakistan, which was 15.42% of Pakistan's total population, and 14.02 million in Afghanistan, which was 42% of Afghanistan's population.
Wow.
That means that the global population with the Pashtun diaspora would be much larger. I wanted to ask what you might know. Les is from South Africa. Is there a Pashtun community in South Africa or?
I don't know, but what I do
know.
No,
I don't think so. Actually, in South Africa, it's very interesting. Can I just mention something? In South Africa, you have the majority of the Indian population that came. It's about 600,000 Hindu and about 400,000 Muslim. And I don't know, in all the time that I was there, and I had very close friends on both sides during dentistry and in philately, and I never ever heard anyone mention about Pashtun being in South Africa.
What I do know is that the earliest Muslim settlers in Australia were Pashtuns. They were taken to Australia to breed camels there. So they were camel breeders, And during their stay in Australia, when they went to Australia, they went there without women. And there, during their stay in Australia, they came to have physical relations with the Aboriginal women. They also produced children with those Aboriginal women in Australia. And then many of them even returned to Afghanistan and to what is now Pakistan, leaving behind their children in Australia. And then you have the story of the stolen generation in Australia. Though those children were often taken away from their Aboriginal mothers
Yeah, yeah.
and raised in orphanages. So they did not grow up practicing Islam, but recently there has been a rediscovery of the Islamic roots, and many of them have started practicing Islam. And another thing is that the Afghan railway, uh, the railway network in Australia that connects its eastern coast to its western coast is even today called Ghan Railway, because the railway tracks were laid down by the Afghans. So the term got corrupted with the passage of time, and Afghan became
Wow.
Ghan Railway.
I would like to add a note. Les mentioned that when he brought the issue of the lost tribes was something he was aware of. I think you grew up in a religious home, Les?
Yeah, in a very religious home. Yeah, a traditional but very religious. Yeah.
From talking to people in Israel, including rabbis, often when one talks to my own experience, what I've heard, and rabbis are asked, some rabbis, what about the lost tribes? A common answer may be, well, what about them? Whoever they were returned at the time of Ezra and Nehemiah with the return of the Judeans from Babylon. Now, according to the Talmud, there's a discussion between Rabbi Akiva and the other sages regarding, will the lost tribes return in the future at the end of days? And or are they just lost? And or was whoever was going to returned at the time of Cyrus and the Persians and the building of the second temple? And the halacha, the Jewish law, is that the sages ruled. Rabbi Akiva said, well, I think they're lost and they're not coming back. And the sages said, well, the prophets say they are coming back, and we do not apply that simply to small numbers from the tribes who came back. And are mentioned in Ezra and Nehemiah in the Book of Chronicles, in various places there are mentioned. The party line, the halakha, the Jewish law on that subject is, the ruling of the sages was, one, they will return at the end of days. And no, Rabbi Akiva, we don't agree with you on that one. They're not lost and not coming back, nor do we regard their return as something that was completed at the time of the return of Jews 70 years after the destruction of the first temple. Now that raises all sorts of hot potato issues, which is, let's say out there, planet Earth, there are 500 million people who, in the end of new beginning of days, which might be now, say, oh, we want to come home. We're Israelites. We want to join you. That raises all sorts of hot potato issues. Well, what about conversion? What about halakha? What about how do you reintegrate 500 million lost relatives with the 15 million of us that are still left after all the massacres and persecutions, and also with respect to the tradition of rabbinic authority, which traditionally religious Jews such as myself and Les would uphold. I don't know the answer to the questions, but I think one of the reasons rabbis get nervous when I or others will ask is because of this issue. Like, it's taken care of. It was taken care of 2,500 years ago. We don't have to deal with it anymore, because think about it. If you're you're at Ellis Island in New York City, and 500 million people want to come in, how do you even handle that? It's a big hot potato. Now, Rabbi Eliyahu ben Avichail, was that his name, of blessed memory, was respected in Israel for his research by Israelis of many different backgrounds. But I don't think that many rabbis would be happy at the prospect of having even deal with a question. They may feel, we have so many problems already, we have to deal with that too. However,
no, I kind of disagree. I think being brought up with it was so mystical that on the other side of Sambatyan that they'll return, and that you can only enter the river on Shabbat, so nobody could ever find where it was. But we were always left with the impression that one day we'll all be reunited. And you know, they say in the time of the temple that there were literally hundreds of thousands of people at the temple, and there was place for everyone. It was like a miracle. So you know, in Hashem, in God's hands, I think at the end of times, is the way I was always brought up, that the lost 10 tribes will return, and we'll be you know, all those who were once Jewish or had a connection to Judaism will be reunited.
well,
That's the whole time of the Messiah. It's so there'll be peace on earth, and everyone will acknowledge who Hashem is, who God is, and it will be so miraculous. And I think it's so exciting. It's just you know, to see people who were like for years and years, decades, centuries lost returning. I think it's just unbelievable.
Well, I'm glad you were brought up that way, and I would myself. That is a hope I share. I wasn't brought up in a religiously observant home at all, so it wasn't even an issue. I just had mentioned that I had encountered attitudes with some rabbis who were not so happy, but I wish they would be happy about that. And I'm glad that you were brought up that way. And that certainly is the normative view, that lots of people like Navras will come back.
I think so, yeah.
Navras, I have a question for you about food.
Yes, please
The
tell me.
question is, I read that Pashtun don't drink coffee, they prefer green tea. Is that true?
I don't think it would be right to generalize this. But I believe that they have a preference for tea, perhaps because coffee isn't grown in that region, and tea was popularized in the Indian subcontinent by the British. And Afghanistan was never under direct British rule. Yet, culturally speaking, it has been very close to the Indian subcontinent. So whatever becomes popular in the Indian subcontinent, sooner or later, also becomes popular in Afghanistan.
And I haven't forgotten when you were here 8 years ago, or maybe it was before that, that we went to the Tandoori restaurant in Jerusalem.
Wow.
And the Tandoori restaurant is a chain of, for our viewers, I would not expect to know this. There's an Indian Jewish family that runs a chain of Indian restaurants.
Yeah, it's owned by Reena Pushkarn.
What?
Her name is Reena Pushkarn, the owner, the Indian owner of that restaurant chain is Reena Pushkarn.
So,
her mother was a Baghdadi Jew, and her father was a Sikh.
I remember the question I asked you, which was, okay, we're in this restaurant, which is supposed to be an Indian restaurant. Now, please, Navras, don't be polite. Tell me the truth. Is this really Indian food, or is this just for tourists? And your answer was half and half. You said this really is Indian cuisine, I think from Rajasthan, but most Israelis would not be able to tolerate Indian spices because they'd have fire coming out of their ears and noses. So the food is Indian, but the spices are more Mizrahi, Moroccan, Jewish. Otherwise, Jews wouldn't eat them here. Did I remember correctly?
Yes, I do remember that. Otherwise, it would not have been edible for Israelis, because it would have been very hard for the Israelis to tolerate such a spices it with in such high intensity.
Les, do you have any other?
Yes, I've got a very, very important question. A very extremely important question. I'll just preface it with a quick story. When I was in 2010 in South Africa at a World Stamp Exhibition, I was representing Israel, and the Pakistani commissioner asked me, how does he know what food there is? And I told him that it's got the Betin sign, that's the Jewish Orthodox sign, and it's got the halal sign. And I bought him a packet of crisps, and I showed him this is the sign. So I got on actually quite well with the Pakistani commissioner. And then the Indian one I also had a close connection with. And I saw that the Indian and the Pakistani commissioners were not talking to each other. There was like a really, there was a rift. You could see there was like a coldness between the two of them. And I said to the guys, let's come have a photograph together. And I said, you know what? I know that you're mad about, and this is going to be the question for you, Naris. I said, I'm sure you've heard of Tendulkar. And the Indian guy's face lit up. And I said, and I'm sure you've heard of Imran Khan. And the Pakistani guy's face lit up. I said, you both like cricket. I also like cricket. And you know what? From that, I broke the ice, and they were like the best friends for the rest of the conference.
Great,
So the exhibition. So my question to you, Naris, are you a crazy cricket supporter? I think it's a very important question.
I'm unlike most of my fellow countrymen in the sense that I could never develop interest in cricket.
Really?
Yes. So in fact, this is a big problem when I'm with people around me, and they discuss so enthusiastically any ongoing cricket match, and I'm at a loss. I don't know how to contribute to that conversation. So this certainly is a problem. I could never develop any fondness for cricket.
But I think Tendulkar, I actually saw him play in Centurion in Pretoria, and I think he's regarded as a semi-god. People stand outside his home, and he's of such stature that he was like one of the greatest cricketers of all time. And he has the status of, he's revered. He really is revered.
Yes, that is true. I think there are basically two things that unite Indians the way nothing else does. One is love for cricket, and the other is love for cinema. So I do share the other love. I have always been a big cinema buff, very fond of cinema.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
I know we could go on talking to you for hours, and I didn't realize when we scheduled this just how late it was, because as I said, I'm usually used to looking, go west, young man. I know it's 7 hours earlier in New York where my mother lives, and it's 10 hours earlier in California. So my sense of time relations going east to India, or when we spoke with Keith Goldstein in Japan, is a little bit off, and I didn't realize, I should have paid more attention, that even when we scheduled this at 6:30, it was 10:30 p.m.
Wow.
It was 10 p.m. in India then,
so it's
now it's 11:38 p.m. here.
Wow,
so it's not fair for me and Les to
I know.
continue talking to you too much longer this time, and next time we'll somehow arrange to do it earlier when Les isn't in his dental office.
Well, it's been such a delight. And Lal, thank you so much for organizing this. This has been really absolutely phenomenal. And I've learned so much. And I'm sure by us sharing this video, many people all over the world are going to have a new insight into what the Pashtuns are and the history. And wow, I'm extremely grateful.
Thank you so much, Dr. Glassman. It's been such a pleasure to meet you, even if only virtually. I hope.
Please go one day. One day. Let's not wait for. Let's do it before the Messiah comes back and before the end of times. Come back to Israel, or maybe we'll go to India. I'd love to go to India. My daughter was there and she loved it.
It would be such a pleasure to extend you a little hospitality whenever you come to India. And as I'm concerned, I'm always on the lookout for any opportunity to visit Israel.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to both of you. Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.